Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if you can see us. Let's check.
We are off screen, I think.
The recording has started. Not sure if we are visible. I'm not sure.
No, I think that maybe someone can reach out in the chat. Okay,
Nope.
thank you.
No. Bring on screen. There we are. Yeah, I'll bring you on screen, Pierre. It's just you need to know how this works.
Yes, I know.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's your first time. First time that you're doing a webinar.
Yeah.
Well, it is 10 o'clock, and we are guys from the clock, but I suggest that we wait a couple of minutes. Okay.
Yeah, let's wait because there are quite some attendees that registered, and the people that are now in the meeting, we are just, I think, halfway. So let's talk for a minute, Pierre, and then we'll start the real content.
Okay, but now you ask something different. Only talk for a minute because I have I have two exciting topics. We have the new appointment dialogue in SuperOffice. And what about SuperOffice Copilot? AI directly integrated into SuperOffice. You pick one.
Yeah, but I'll pick the last one. But can you just talk for 1 minute then?
That is so difficult. But well, maybe for the participants listening in, within SuperOffice we have SuperOffice AI Lab, and within the AI Lab, all our customers can sign up to have already SuperOffice Copilot directly integrated inside the SuperOffice user interface, basically in the mini card. And let me tell you, it is really cool. It is amazing. It does already things automatically for you. And since I have only 1 minute to talk, webinars are coming. So I would suggest when you see the announcement coming of SuperOffice Copilot, the webinar, please join, because you will see how AI is directly integrated into the mini panel where you can ask questions. It can interact with the company card. You can ask for insights from the company card currently being displayed. You can ask, hey, what was my latest activity with this company, for example? So without going through all the activities, you can get instant insights, a huge time saver already. But Marcel, it is not a webinar about SuperOffice Copilot that is coming. I think we have another very interesting topic today, right?
Yeah, right. So what I'm about to start for all of you is a webinar about Power BI and about databases. And it's all around DataBridge, of course, because it's a DataBridge webinar, but I thought we get so many questions about exporting details from SuperOffice to be used in tools like Power BI. There are also some other tools, of course, also other BI tools, but we get so many questions. So I think I thought it was a good idea to host a webinar on this. What are we going to do today? Well, we are going to dive into the question, why are we supposed to use SQL data or a database, a SQL database? Why do we do this? Why is it better than any other option that we have in DataBridge? How are we going to configure and export? How are we going to use the data in Power BI? Because for this webinar, I chose Power BI to do some showing of data, some reporting. All the data that you need, that's topic number 4 on the agenda, and I'll come back to that later. And of course, we have some Q&A session. Somewhere in between, I'll also show you how to start your 60-day trial to start working on this yourself. Now, to manage expectations, this webinar is meant as an introduction to DataBridge SQL features and an introduction on how to use the data for BI in BI tools like Power BI. Now, my intention was not to turn you into a Power BI expert with this webinar, because I'm also not an expert. It's about the basics, so you can explore further yourself later on. That's the idea. And of course, we'll only have like 45 minutes. So let's start with the first item on the agenda. Why is SQL database? Why is using a SQL database better than export to a file, the other alternative that DataBridge offers? Now, I want to dive into that topic by using an example. If I have set up DataBridge to export to a file, what DataBridge does is it creates and first deletes the file if there is a file with the same name, and then it exports all the data from SuperOffice and puts it in a file. If you then run the job again to fetch new data and updated data, what DataBridge needs to do is it needs to delete the file first, and then it needs to fetch the same information that was already in the file first, and after that it will process new lines that are in there, new data that is in there. So it's not very efficient. In this example that you saw, in the first export, it exported 3 lines, and with the second export, it had 2 new lines, but it needed to export all the 3 first lines too. That's not very efficient. When we look at a database table, this can be set up in a much more efficient way. We use a DataBridge feature to only fetch the new and updated records from a SuperOffice selection, and we use the feature of databases to update an existing records without any hassle. So how that goes is like this. DataBridge fetches only new and updated records, and when we first create a table and initialize the table, there are my 3 records again. It's the same example as I used for the file. So it's 3 records added to the table. Now the difference with a file is that the table will not be deleted or truncated. It just fetches, DataBridge just fetches only the new and updated ones and add that to the table. And in this case, when you compare it to the file export, with the database setup, it has processed 5 records, while with the file, it has processed 8 records. And so after 2 jobs, that's already 60% less records. So the benefits of a database, when it comes to data usage, there's no need to export all the data every time. You can now update the target. With the target, of course, I mean the database in this case. It's much faster because further processing of data, you can use SQL database features to do magic on the data later on. Sometimes for Power BI or other BI tools, there's this SuperOffice mirroring service, and DataBridge can also take something. DataBridge can be an alternative, I should say, for the mirroring service. And why? The mirroring service is almost a complete copy of the database, of the SQL database that you get. But in that case, you need to know how the database is built and how the joins are working, etc., etc. When you use DataBridge, there's no need to have all this knowledge of the database. DataBridge fetches all the linked entities and lists for you. And of course, DataBridge will also apply the filter, because the base for an export is a SuperOffice selection. And also already within the selection, within the selection criteria, you can already apply a filter, like only get customers, or only export suppliers, or only export sales of a certain type, for instance. There's no need to know the database, the database for that if you use mirroring services. And data quality can also be a benefit of a database, because you can perform calculations and set default values if they are empty in SuperOffice. And this is also based on, for instance, SQL features, but also based on DataBridge features. If you use transformations, for instance, or default values within DataBridge, there's no need to think about this yourself. I think that for most of us, no need to export all the data every time is the most important one here, because this saves on the metered services. Every DataBridge subscription has a certain amount of records that you can process every month, and setting up a database export instead of a file export is much more efficient when it comes to the number of records that are processed. Now, to configure an export, let's go through the steps. I'm not going to do this live because that would take much more time. So I prepared some screen prints to guide you through the setup of an export. And of course, when we reach the details to name the database or the table, etc., to set that up, I will mention that for you. But before we start, of course, you need, well, a database. We support versions on-site from the Microsoft SQL Server databases. The minimum version is 2016. So this is on-site, and we also have the cloud-based version of Microsoft SQL Server, which is called Azure SQL Database. We support both of them. If you are not familiar with setting up a database yourself, I can give you a shopping list, and you can you can maybe contact your favorite IT guy in your office and ask for a database on one of those supported SQL servers. Your shopping list should have you should have the server name because you want to make connection, of course, to the database, the database name, and you have to have some user credentials. And before you start, also on the shopping list should be one or more SuperOffice selections, because you need to have a selection with the data you want to export before you start in DataBridge. Right, there we go. This is DataBridge, and I've started a brand new integration. I give it a name, my first database export, and on the source side, I've selected SuperOffice CRM Online. Of course, if you have an on-site installation, you would see SuperOffice CRM on-site here. It's automatically connected, my online environment, and on the other side, I chose Microsoft Azure SQL or SQL Server. Now, if you don't have DataBridge with a professional plan, then you will see this option, but you won't have the option to fill in the database details. Authentication mode, I've set it to SQL Server authentication, which is simple as having a username and a password. I think that's the most simple here in my example here. I fill in the server name, the database name. In this case, the database name is called CRM. I have a username and I have a password. And when I now hit next, I'll be forwarded to this screen where you can select your SuperOffice selection. In this case, I've created a SuperOffice selection that's called PowerBI customers. And in there are, well, surprise, customers and my business relations. In the field, in the fields pane, you can select all the fields that you would like to have in your export. This will, of course, then be in your database later on. So I chose a few fields here that I would like to create reports on. This also needs some preparation, of course, because before you can create reports, you need to know which fields do I need. And let me tell you, it's best to have some extra fields in there. It's better safe than to be sorry, because if you need to add fields later on, your database table will change and your Power BI report might also need to change. So it's best to have a bit more fields. Maybe when you expect to have when you expect you need some more fields in future, it's best to add them now already. Since I don't want to export everything all the time, I'm going to add a option here. I'm going to switch on an option. It's in advanced settings and it's called new and changed only. And this means that the first time I do the export, everything, every detail, every row that is in my SuperOffice selection will be exported to the database table. And after this, when DataBridge runs again, when the DataBridge jobs are executed every hour or every day, it will only fetch the new and changed records from that selection. So if my selection has 1 million lines and only 2 are changed, it will only fetch the 2 changed records. And this is, of course, much more efficient than exporting everything every time. The next step. In the data step, I can rearrange my data. I can switch the order of the columns, and I can add transformation. So if I would need to have some logic applied to some columns, like having a contact, if a contact is empty or a category is empty, I can maybe do some other magic on the data. So it's the source data plus all the columns that you add by using transformations. Then in the next step, which is called destination, this is where we choose how things end up and are processed in our database. What you also need, what you should have on your shopping list, and I now remember that I forgot this one, is the table schema. It's also something that you need to get from your favorite IT guy. You have already set up the database name when you connect it to the SQL server, and the only thing you need to do now is create a table name or set the table name. In this case, because I chose a SuperOffice selection that has all my customers, I'm naming the table customers. The table action is keep the table and all records. This means that I will not delete all the records from the table once my next DataBridge job runs. If I would do this, if I would remove the table and all the records, then I should have disabled the option to only fetch the new and updated ones. In some scenarios, you could ask, why is this option here? In some scenarios, there is no other way than to repopulate the entire table. So also in a database, there's something we need to match on, because if a record is updated in SuperOffice, how do I know which record is linked to that SuperOffice record? And we do this in this example by using the company ID. The company ID is the unique database identifier in this case for companies. And I'm 100% sure that this value is unique for the entire database. If you compare it by using, for instance, the SuperOffice number field for companies, that's not 100% guaranteed to be unique. So I'm using the database identifier for this. And what will happen if it found a duplicate? With the duplicate action, I selected override existing fields. And this is, of course, necessary because, like, if the company name changes, I would like to see that also the new company name appears in my Power BI reports. If I would not have chosen override existing fields, then, of course, the company name in my database would not have changed. So I hope this is sufficient information for you now to set up your own database connection and choosing the tables later. There will be another example coming up. Then I have to choose the schedule. Let's do this daily. Let's do every day at 6 o'clock. Let's update the data in my SQL database to provide the latest data to my Power BI reports. Then when I process everything and I look into my SQL database, there it is. So there's the table that's called customers. And I have some IDs here that I think is very handy to explain. If you look into the SQL Server Management Studio, which is the tool, one of the tools where you can view the data in your database, you'll have 3 columns with IDs. The first one is just a number, like Excel shows you a number. It's the row number. The ID, that's something that DataBridge creates. It's not something that that DataBridge uses internally, but it's just an ID that we have added. The contact ID, this is the important one. Remember the setting that I did to match on the company ID? The company ID is a user-friendly name for the technical name contact ID. So the contact ID in this case, this is where we will match later on, or DataBridge will match if a record already exists. So in this case, the first record is called Heineken Research. It has contact ID 33. When this record again appears through DataBridge towards the database, it will look for number 33 and update the corresponding record. I hope that's clear. And then talking about the technical names, as you see, I have chosen to use the technical names as the column names in SQL Server. I think that's a bit easier because if you need to look up some values later on, if you want to know which fields you want to connect in your Power BI reports, these technical names can also all be found in the technical documentation of the SuperOffice APIs and the SuperOffice database. So if you need some documentation later on, I think it's much more easy to use technical names in your export instead of the user-friendly names. Now, let's see how we can use this data that we have exported to our SQL database in Power BI or any other BI reporting tool. I've chosen the Power BI, and what I've done is I've selected SQL Server. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Power BI, but that's the option up here. So when you add data through SQL Server, it's also an option to choose the SQL Server here. You'll get again the question to connect to your SQL Server database. So you need the server credentials, the server name, and the database again here. For SQL Server, there's a data connectivity mode. It's called import. You have the choice between import or direct query. With import, it will fetch all the data from your SQL database, load it into Power BI, and then query on that. I always choose direct query because then you have you query directly on your SQL database, the SQL database that has the latest data from your CRM system. So when I'm done here, click next, and I have to enter my credentials again, or the credentials that you got from your IT guy. If that is done, you can select the table, and in this case, there's only one in this example because we only had the customers table, and it's right up there with all the fields that I have exported, with all the fields that I chose to export from DataBridge. Now with Power BI, it's very handy to add a graph or any other visual, and I've chosen to add a visual which is a map. Why? Well, because we have the name of the countries of my customers in the export towards the SQL database. So I've selected the country field to be visible, and then you'll see some blue dots appearing on the map. If I choose another field to go with that, like in this case, the category, you'll see that some of the dots have different colors now, or have two colors. And on top, there's a legend right now. So I have business partners in my export and I have customers in my export. And now on the map, I can see where my customers and business partners are. It's this easy. Power BI takes away a lot of the magic that you need to do in other BI tools or in Excel, for instance. And Power BI just shows you immediate results when you select another field. Now, this is a very simple example with only customers that I have in my selection. I only exported data from those customers. But what about if we need more data? And with all the data you need, what I mean is, some cases I need to show data, or I need to provide my report data or items, list items, associates, for instance, that are not in my selection. In this case, what if we would like to show sales related to co-workers? In this case, I have 4 co-workers that are responsible for sales in my company. If I look at this month's sale selection on the right side, you see that only 2 of my colleagues have sales to their name, JR and MASP. But what I would also like to see in my Power BI report, of course, is the colleagues MR and MW. In this case, they don't have any sales to their name yet this month. If I would only export this month's sales data, I would only have the owners that have sales to their name. But I would like to show, of course, both colleagues also that don't have sale to their names. So in that case, what I need is more than just the selection of sales. What we need to create is a table with the data we want to count, which is the sales or the sale amount in this case. And we need a table with the full list of data that we want to report on. In this case, it's a full list of associates, or maybe more in particular, my sales associates, my sales co-workers. So this first selection of this month's sales is one of the selection that we need. The second selection is a selection where we make sure that it lists us all the employees, all the co-workers. In this example, I've chosen all the employees, all the co-workers, and not only the one that are in the sales department. I needed to figure out how am I able with DataBridge, with the SuperOffice selection, to give me a list of all the employees. In my example, all the employees need to add their holiday plans or their private appointments to the SuperOffice calendar, of course. And the type of the appointment that they need to use is private. Now, every colleague, of course, has some holiday planned or has private appointments. So I'm pretty sure that every coworker, every employee has at least one private appointment in his calendar. So what I do is I create a selection of all the private appointments for all the coworkers, all my colleagues from the last year. And that way, I'm pretty sure that I have catched all the employees. So what I did is I created a selection called Power BI's activities by all employees. And what I do is I'm not very interested in the actual appointment information, but I'm interested in the owner information of the appointment, because the owner of the appointment is, of course, every associate, every coworker. And what I need, and luckily DataBridge provides this to me, I need some of the fields, some information that is linked to an associate. In this case, I've selected, for instance, if the associate is still active, yes or no. The email address, the first name, the last name, the owner ID, and of course also the primary group and its role. I'm using this data to create a list of all the coworkers or all my colleagues in my database. Of course, I can use this later on for companies because company have an owner. I can use this for sales because sales have an owner, but I can use this for so much more because everything in SuperOffice, an appointment, a sale, a document, all is linked to an associate. So this list of associates is really important, especially when I want to report on also things that are not there, as I showed you in the sales example. So let's skip a few steps and go right away to the destination. I've named the table list associates. Here's also a duplicate match setup, and that's the owner ID. And the owner ID is the login name, like MASP or JR or whatever. Also scheduled. I think because coworkers don't change that much, I've set it up only once a month, but of course in your environment or in your situation, you can do this much more often if you like. And there it is. The result in SQL Server in my database is a list that is called list associates, a table that's called list associates, and there I have my associate name. So there they are. And this is what I need in my report. Let's use this data now in Power BI. I still have my list of customers, my table of customers linked to Power BI. Let's go back to adding another SQL Server connection because I need to add the new table that I just created. You can go to SQL Server option in the top menu, or you can select recent sources, and then it remembers the SQL connection that you already had. So what I did now is, this is the contents of my database, and there it is. There's the new table, which is called List Associates. I've selected that one, and since Power BI now knows that there's more than one table linked, you can set up relationships between these tables. And what I need to do is, this is the option where you find the relationship dialog. I am now going to link the associate ID value from my customers table to the associate name in my list of associates table. And I'm going to set this up with a many-to-one relationship because there can be many company records, many customer records linking to one and the same record in my associate list. This is, if you know a bit about SQL databases, this is a join that you set up here. It's just named a bit differently in Power BI. When that is done, I have selected the associate names now from my list associates table. I didn't select my associate name now from the customer table. Why? Because I want to know also which of my coworkers don't have a customer to their name as an owner. And in this case, I've also selected country and the count for contact ID. And the result, as you see on screen, is a diagram, a bar graph that shows the companies listed to my coworkers' names, even if they don't have a company listed to their name, and where they are, in which country they are. It's just connecting the SQL tables, selecting the fields that you would like to report on, the right graph, in this case a bar graph, and the magic is done. You can easily preview the results of your graph, the results of your report very quickly by just selecting a few names. Another example is this one, where I also included requests. So I set up another SuperOffice selection with requests, and I've also linked this one to my Power BI report. And in this case, I now have an overview of all the requests in which business my companies are that filed the requests and who are the owners of the requests. And also in this case, as you see, there are 2 colleagues that don't have any requests to their name at this moment. Then we have talked about lists that we need to provide, to make sure that we also see like associates that don't have any sales or companies to their name. And there are some other lists from selections that you can create. Some examples: you can create a selection of companies to get businesses, categories, or sources. You can create a selection of persons to get the consent list or the position list, etc., etc. So there's a lot of these SuperOffice lists that you can get through the proper SuperOffice selection. The example that I just showed you with associates, I think change much more than a category or business list. Of course, you're also able to create a table manually without the use of DataBridge and add all the categories or businesses yourself, of course. And remember, there's also an option if you want to simplify lists. If you have like a category a category list for customers that says customer type A, customer type B, customer type C, you're able within DataBridge to use a transformation to export not customer type A, B, or C, but just customer to your Power BI report. So you can wisely and efficiently use transformations in DataBridge to make things more efficient or to simplify things for your reports. That concludes my explanation for exporting stuff and showing you how to link it to Power BI. I think now it's time, well, maybe in 10 minutes, it's time to try yourself. When I send you all the invites, I promised you to have a 60-day trial ready for your DataBridge environment to try the databases yourself. I'll put the link to the form that you need to fill out in the chat later on also. You can also try to scan the QR code from the screen right now. How to start your 60-day trial? Make sure you have a DataBridge subscription or a trial running. So what I mean with this, before I can enable your 60-day trial, I need to have your SuperOffice tenant visible in our DataBridge Operations Center. So I need later on your cust ID or your serial number if you use SuperOffice on site. But before you send me the form, before you fill in the form, please make sure that you have a DataBridge trial ready. Once I received your form application, then I will enable it. And then I'll send you a short email that the SQL connector is enabled for your environment. And then you can try yourself. And after 60 days, I'll send you another email that the trial will end and what the action should be by then. I hope everything was clear. And Pierre, did questions come in? Because yes. I wasn't able to scan that while I was talking.
Absolutely. We got some very interesting questions coming in during your, well, very interesting, a little bit technical, but very interesting presentation, but I think it was very useful. One thing, what you mentioned regarding getting your subscription or trial of DataBridge, maybe just to point out, you can get your DataBridge trial or subscription up and running in the SuperOffice App Store, appstore.superoffice.com. And yeah, you can just go there to install it. So we have some very good questions. Marcel, are you ready for the first question?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. During the first question, during the export to SQL Server, using the linked entities /lists, does it also export custom fields?
Yes, it can. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah.
Also a bit technical, but all the fields that you can select in the fields pane, those can definitely be exported. And if you miss fields in there, there's also options to add manual fields. I think it's good to refer to our knowledge base on how that works, but please check for manual fields and you'll find the way to add those. But normally, user-defined fields should be in there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yes, then I have another question. That is regarding an option. Is the new and changed only option using the last updated field of the company card, or does it look to each individual field? And then, for instance, I will only export 5 fields and one other field which is not exported has been updated. The updated timestamp has been updated, but the exported fields have this not. Does this function checks this?
No, it's the entire record.
Okay.
So if you export companies and you export only the name and the department, if like the category has changed, a field that you don't export, the entire row is updated. It has a new date timestamp, and then DataBridge will also fetch it. So even though the fields that you only are interested in did not change, it will still export.
Okay, good. Then I have another question. If using an on-premise SQL server for all of this, does it need to be exposed to the internet for this to work? Or do you have some sort of DataBridge connector you need to install on the on-premise side?
No, it needs to be exposed. We don't have a proprietary connector or whatever. It needs to be exposed, but we also share the IP addresses that DataBridge uses to connect to your SQL server. And with the IP addresses, you can set up some whitelisting.
Okay.
That's the only security that we from our side can offer right now. But you can, of course, also use SQL in the cloud, so in the Azure SQL environment.
Yeah, well, somebody, Philip Witzel, thank you. You posted already a link where it is stated the requirements and the checklist before using DataBridge. So it was already posted by one of the participants. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Then I have another question coming in. What are the costs after a 60-day trial? And does it go monthly or by records?
For the SQL connector, you need the DataBridge professional plan, and I don't know. I think it's 249.
No, 200, and maybe I can answer this this question. DataBridge comes into two versions. We have DataBridge Standard and we have DataBridge Professional. The standard of DataBridge, and Marcel, maybe you can post also the link of the differences. DataBridge Standards, which does not include the SQL connector and some other, let's say, enterprise features. DataBridge Standard costs 109 euros per site per month and includes 50,000 records per month of processing. Any additional records you go on top of that, you need to acquire another record pack of 50,000 records that will cost you 35 euros. When you go to DataBridge Professional, which includes the SQL Server and SQL Azure connector, but also Smart Source Control, SharePoint, really geared more, well, to the larger organizations, that is 255 euros per month, but also includes 150,000 records of processing per month. And with records, we mean really a complete line, let's say. So it's not an entity, a complete line. But Marcel also posted a comparison overview in the chat. Marcel, then I had another question coming in. Where do you draw the line between doing reports via SuperOffice dashboards and Power BI analysis?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The dashboards can do a lot, but not everything. Especially what I see is when it combines data with other sources. That's, I think, the most used option if you want to use like ERP data or data from your HR system or whatever. That's where Power BI comes in, because that's not, you cannot connect that external data to the SuperOffice dashboards unless you import it in SuperOffice. And of course, there are always some report wishes or dashboard wishes that the SuperOffice dashboards cannot do in a proper way. So that's also where we see that customers use BI. Think about the map. Think about the world map with where your customers are and how they are divided and how they are spread out over the world. That's used a lot. Yeah. But for the rest, it's all down what your use case is.
Yeah. Okay, let me see how much data can be exported per month. Well, we discussed that. And then I have another question. So if you have a big database with millions and millions of rows, this is not the tool. It's a question.
Yes, it is the tool. unless your big database with millions of rows also changes every day. If a million rows every day change, then this might not be the tool. But if you have a big database with, let's say, 1 million of rows, but only 1% changes every month, the first export will be a large one. There will be millions of rows. So you might hit you will certainly hit the limit of the included records, then only the first export. But later on, if you set up the SuperOffice selection correctly and you only fetch the new and updated ones, then you only use a few, let's say a few lines per month. So this is definitely the tool for this. The feature that DataBridge has with fetching only the new and updated records is made for this. Yeah.
Okay. We got a question. Yeah, very good. What are the benefits with DataBridge compared to API and webhooks?
DataBridge will export data as you read it in the SuperOffice client, in the SuperOffice UI. So if you see a company card, it will also export the business name, the category name, the associate details. If you would use the mirroring service, for instance, you would get separate tables. And if you use API and webhooks, you need to know how to program this. So if you are looking for a quick way or a way where non-technical users can set up an export to feed your BI reports, then DataBridge is the tool for this. If you are a seasoned developer with really special wishes and a lot of time, by the way, then you can use the API and webhooks.
Okay, well, and maybe to add on that, when basing this on an API, first of all, yeah, you have the learning curve of the APIs. You need to do the development, and then the application needs to be hosted somewhere on an Azure environment, for example, and you need to keep that Azure environment alive. And then when API changes are coming from SuperOffice, what is happening? Well, you need to update your program again, and that is a nice thing. DataBridge is fully developed on the standard on NetServer, on the APIs of SuperOffice, so customers don't need to worry about that. I got another question coming in. Does the trial also uses these limits, seeing its trial and error on the first go?
Yeah. So let me tell you that we will be, there's like a fair use policy here. We are not that strict, Pierre? We are not that strict, no.
No, we're not difficult.
If you want to try it out, it's not a problem if you make errors. It's not a problem if you need to do it 5 times over and over again. Just the only thing that I would like to ask is avoid exporting millions and millions of records. That's the only thing that I would like to ask. But further on, go ahead and if it's too much, if we see that it's outside of the fair use policy, then I'll contact you.
Of course, we'll put our glasses on and see who is using what. But again, like Marcel said, we are not the most difficult ones.
No, we're not that strict.
Okay. Well, there are no other questions coming in. Let me quickly scan. No. Well, this was very nice, very interactive. Marcel, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I put in the chat. There's also again the link to the form that you can fill out to start the 60-day trial. Again, make sure that you already have a DataBridge environment up and running. So a DataBridge account linked to your tenant. It could be your demo tenant, test tenant, or whatever. But please make sure that it's already there, because otherwise I cannot enable the trial.
Okay.
Okay, then if there's no further questions, Pierre, then up to the next webinar.
Yes, absolutely. Looking forward to it, and yeah, no new questions. And then, from my side here, from 's Hertogenbosch, the Netherlands, I wish you all a great day.
Thanks for joining, and I wish you also a great day. See you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye.